If I asked you right now to name the thing you fear most about menopause, I already know what most of you would say. The hot flashes. That sudden volcanic surge of heat that rises from your chest, floods your face until your skin radiates, and leaves you drenched at 3 in the morning. I understand that fear because I have sat across from hundreds of women who described that exact experience with trembling voices and exhausted eyes, and I never once dismissed that suffering. But here is what I need to tell you today. The hot flashes are not the most dangerous thing happening inside your body during menopause. Not even close. The most dangerous thing is something you cannot feel. Something unfolding right now in the walls of your arteries with a silence that should terrify you far more than any hot flash ever could. And the biggest mistake I see women make year after year is pouring all of their worry into the symptom that makes them uncomfortable while completely ignoring the one that can kill them. I want you to understand something beautiful and intricate about your body before menopause that most women were never taught. For decades, estrogen, that hormone you probably associate with fertility and periods, was quietly, relentlessly protecting your heart and blood vessels every single day. And it did this through mechanisms so sophisticated that researchers are still uncovering their depth. Picture the innermost lining of your blood vessels, a delicate single-cell thick layer called the endothelium. This is not a passive pipe wall. It is one of the most metabolically active organs in your body, and estrogen was its devoted guardian. Every day, estrogen stimulated an enzyme called endothelial nitric oxide synthase, producing a molecule called nitric oxide, arguably the most important molecule in your cardiovascular system. Nitric oxide tells your artery walls to relax, stay supple, dilate when blood flow increases, and resist plaque formation. It is the reason your arteries remained flexible for decades, the reason your blood pressure stayed healthy, the reason your vessels did not stiffen the way they do in aging men. Estrogen was the conductor of this orchestra, and nitric oxide was its most critical instrument. But estrogen's protection went deeper. Inside your liver, estrogen regulated the receptors that pull LDL cholesterol out of your bloodstream. Tiny molecular hands grabbing circulating LDL particles and pulling them inside to be broken down. When estrogen was robust, those hands were numerous and active, keeping your bloodstream clean. Estrogen also maintained HDL cholesterol's functionality as a scavenger, removing deposits from artery walls and transporting them back to the liver. It was a complete, elegant loop of protection that most women never knew existed because it worked so silently there was nothing to feel. There was still more. Estrogen suppressed adhesion molecules, proteins like VCAM1 and ICAM1, that act like molecular Velcro, catching immune cells and inviting them to burrow into artery walls. Without this suppression, white blood cells stick to vessel linings, gorge on oxidized LDL, and become foam cells, the building blocks of atherosclerotic plaque. Estrogen kept that inflammatory cascade firmly in check. Your arteries were actively, aggressively defended by a hormonal system you took completely for granted. And then menopause arrives, and this entire system begins to dismantle itself. In the 12 to 24 months after your last period, the cardiovascular changes are staggering, and they happen with a speed that catches most women, and many of their healthcare providers, completely off guard. As estrogen plummets, nitric oxide production drops sharply, and your arteries begin losing the elasticity they have maintained for decades. Picture a rubber band that has been supple and responsive your entire life suddenly beginning to stiffen, to resist stretching, to lose its bounce. Arterial stiffness, which can be measured by something called pulse wave velocity, increases dramatically in postmenopausal women. And this stiffness is not merely a number on a test. It means that every single time your heart beats, the pressure wave that travels through your arteries meets resistance instead of flexibility. And that resistance translates directly into higher blood pressure, greater cardiac workload, and accelerated damage to the delicate endothelial lining that was once so beautifully protected. Without estrogen's regulation of those hepatic LDL receptors, your cholesterol profile begins to shift in ways that would alarm any cardiovascular specialist. LDL cholesterol can spike by 10 to 15% within the first 2 years of menopause, and this is not a gradual, gentle rise. For many women, it is sudden and dramatic, a jump that takes their numbers from the comfortable zone into the danger zone seemingly overnight. HDL cholesterol, meanwhile, may maintain its levels on paper but often loses its functional capacity, becoming less effective at reverse cholesterol transport, less capable of pulling those dangerous deposits out of artery walls. The net effect is a bloodstream that has become significantly more atherogenic, more prone to building the fatty plaques that narrow arteries and eventually rupture. Meanwhile, body fat redistributes toward the abdomen, creating metabolically dangerous visceral fat that churns out inflammatory cytokines and promotes insulin resistance. High-sensitivity C-reactive protein, a biomarker of vascular inflammation, begins climbing. An elevated hsCRP is one of the most powerful predictors of future cardiovascular events we have. Your arteries are stiffening, cholesterol rising, inflammation increasing, blood pressure creeping upward, and you feel absolutely nothing. No pain, no warning, just the hot flashes. This is the cruel irony I observe constantly. Women track their hot flashes with meticulous precision. They know exactly how many they had last week, which foods trigger them, which supplements help. They have tried black cohosh, evening primrose oil, cooling pillows, and when I ask about their last lipid panel, they look at me blankly. When I ask about their blood pressure trend, they shrug. When I ask if anyone has measured their hsCRP, the answer is almost always no. No one told them. No one warned them that the fire they could feel on their skin was nothing compared to the fire they could not feel in their arteries. I think about a woman named Diane, who came to see me at 54. She was consumed by her hot flashes, 12 to 15 episodes per day, waves of searing heat that left her clothing soaked and her confidence shattered. She had consulted 3 practitioners, and everyone focused exclusively on managing the flashes. Herbal supplements from one, a low-dose antidepressant from another, lifestyle modifications from the third. Well-intentioned, but not a single one looked beneath the surface. When I ran a comprehensive cardiovascular workup, what came back was sobering. Her LDL had jumped from 118 to 167 in 18 months, a 42% increase placing her in the high-risk category. Her hsCRP was 3.8, signaling significant cardiovascular inflammation. Her blood pressure was 142/88, stage 2 hypertension. Diane had no idea. She had spent 2 years chasing hot flash relief while a cardiovascular time bomb assembled itself inside her arteries, entirely unmonitored. I will never forget Diane seeing those numbers. She sat very still, hands folded, then began to cry, the quiet, trembling tears of someone who realizes she has been looking in the wrong direction. She felt betrayed, not by her body, but by a system that treated menopause as annoying symptoms, rather than a fundamental metabolic transformation requiring comprehensive monitoring. She was right, because this reduction of menopause to hot flashes and mood swings is one of the most dangerous blind spots in women's healthcare. If you are watching this and realizing no one has ever examined your cardiovascular markers during menopause, I have put together a resource in the description below that walks you through exactly which numbers you need to know and why each one matters, because this knowledge could genuinely save your life. What we did for Diane was straightforward but comprehensive. High-quality omega-3 fatty acids, EPA and DHA, that directly influence the same pathways estrogen used to regulate, supporting endothelial function, reducing triglycerides, and dampening vascular inflammation. Structured cardiovascular exercise, not casual walking, but intentional aerobic training that challenges the heart and vasculature. Dietary patterns emphasizing anti-inflammatory foods rich in polyphenols, fiber, and healthy fats. And a monitoring schedule tracking lipids, hsCRP, and blood pressure every 3 months. Over 8 months, Diane's LDL dropped from 167 to 128. Her HSCRP fell from 3.8 to 1.1. Her blood pressure normalized, and here is what still makes me smile. Her hot flashes improved too, not because we targeted them, but because improving vascular health restored endothelial function and nitric oxide production, stabilizing the thermoregulatory system. The hot flashes and cardiovascular deterioration were never separate problems. They were two expressions of the same vascular dysfunction. This connection deserves far more attention. Research shows that women with frequent, severe vasomotor symptoms have measurably worse endothelial function and higher cardiovascular risk. The hot flash is a window into your blood vessel health, a moment of vascular instability revealing how your endothelium is coping with estrogen's loss. The hot flash is the symptom you can feel. The arterial damage is the one you cannot. And the tragedy is that most women are told to manage the former while no one mentions the latter. I need to tell you about another woman because her story carries a warning that I believe every woman over 50 needs to hear. Margaret was 61 when I met her, though I did not meet her in my office. She had been feeling exhausted for months, a bone-deep tiredness that settled into her muscles and her joints, and her very willingness to get through the day. A tiredness she could not shake regardless of how much she slept. She noticed that climbing the stairs to her bedroom left her slightly breathless, and she attributed this to being out of shape, to the natural slowing of a body in its 6th decade. Occasionally, she felt a strange, dull ache between her shoulder blades that came and went without pattern or explanation. She mentioned these things to no one because they seemed so ordinary, so vague, so easily filed under the broad and forgiving category of aging. Then one evening, while washing dishes after dinner, the warm water running over her hands and the kitchen quiet except for the television in the next room, Margaret felt a sudden, intense pain radiating through her jaw, accompanied by a wave of nausea so severe she had to grip the edge of the sink to keep from falling. Her husband saw her face go pale, not just white, but a grayish pallor that he later said frightened him more than anything he had ever witnessed, and he wanted to call an ambulance immediately. Margaret refused. She said it was probably a dental issue, maybe a cracked tooth, maybe TMJ flaring up. She took 2 aspirin and sat down on the couch. Her husband called the ambulance anyway, and that decision saved her life. Margaret was having a heart attack. Not the dramatic chest-clutching event Hollywood depicts, but the kind women actually have. Jaw pain, nausea, overwhelming fatigue, back pain, shortness of breath. These symptoms are so different from the classic male presentation that they are missed and misdiagnosed with horrifying frequency. Even the ER triage nurse noted Margaret's EKG as borderline. It was a female cardiologist who insisted on troponin levels and caught what others almost missed. What haunts Margaret is not the cardiac event. It is realizing she had received warning signals for months and dismissed everyone. The fatigue, breathlessness, back pain, these were her cardiovascular system crying for attention, and she had silenced those cries with the most dangerous phrase in women's health. That's just menopause. This is the phrase I want to eradicate. Menopause is not a catch-all explanation for every symptom after 50. The tendency to attribute every ache to hormonal changes, rather than demanding cardiovascular evaluation, is one of the most lethal patterns in women's health. Here is a number to remember. Cardiovascular disease is the #1 killer of women over 50. Not breast cancer, not lung cancer, not all cancers combined. Yet when you ask women what they fear most after menopause, the vast majority say cancer. This perception gap is a public health catastrophe. Women schedule mammograms religiously, and they are right to do so. But that same vigilance is almost never directed toward the cardiovascular system, the very system that poses the greatest threat to their lives. The empowering truth is that these cardiovascular changes, dramatic as they are not inevitable destinies. They are modifiable, addressable, and in many cases reversible, if you start soon enough. Omega-3 fatty acids in therapeutic doses, Not the forgotten capsule in your drawer, but high-quality EPA and DHA that reduce triglycerides, modulate inflammation, support endothelial cell membrane fluidity, and improve arterial stiffness measures. For postmenopausal women, omega-3s address the exact pathways left unprotected by estrogen's withdrawal. Structured cardiovascular exercise, progressive aerobic training in heart rate zones several times weekly, combined with resistance training that builds metabolically active muscle and improves insulin sensitivity. This combination improves endothelial function, stimulates nitric oxide, reduces arterial stiffness, lowers blood pressure, and reduces systemic inflammation, recreating through deliberate effort many protective effects estrogen once provided automatically. Know your numbers, not vaguely, but precisely. Your LDL and HDL, triglycerides, fasting glucose, hemoglobin A1C, blood pressure trend, and critically, your HSCRP. Below 1 milligram per liter means low risk, between 1 and 3, moderate risk, above 3, high risk demanding intervention. If you have gone through menopause and no one has measured your HSCRP, you are flying blind through the most cardiovascularly dangerous decade of your life. I have created a comprehensive guide linked below in the description with exactly how to request these tests, your target ranges, and a practical daily protocol for omega-3, exercise, and dietary strategies, because having a clear roadmap makes the difference between intention and action. Feed your arteries deliberately. Dark leafy greens rich in dietary nitrates that convert to nitric oxide. Berries dense with anthocyanins that improve endothelial function. Wild salmon, sardines, mackerel delivering omega-3s in their most bioavailable form. Extra virgin olive oil providing potent anti-inflammatory effects on vascular tissue. These are accessible, affordable, and profoundly effective when consumed consistently, and make the fundamental mindset shift. Stop thinking of menopause as symptoms to tolerate and start thinking of it as a major metabolic event requiring the same monitoring you would give diabetes or thyroid disease. Menopause represents a cardiovascular transformation of similar magnitude, and it deserves the same vigilance. Margaret told me something months later that I have carried ever since. She said, I spent 10 years worrying about hot flashes and night sweats and brain fog, and I never once asked anyone about my heart. Then she paused and said something that made the room go quiet. The hot flashes were so loud that I couldn't hear my arteries screaming. That sentence captures everything. The visible symptoms of menopause are so loud, so present, so impossible to ignore that they consume all of a woman's attention. And behind that noise, in the silence of arteries and cholesterol particles and inflammatory markers, the real threat builds until the day it announces itself with a jaw ache during dinner, or a breathlessness that does not pass, or a fatigue so profound your body is telling you it cannot continue carrying the burden no one thought to examine. I am not telling you to ignore your hot flashes. They matter, they affect your quality of life, and they deserve thoughtful treatment. But I am telling you, with all the urgency and all the conviction I can summon through this screen, that if your hot flashes are the only aspect of menopause that you and your healthcare providers are paying attention to, you are making the biggest mistake of your life. A mistake measured not in discomfort, but in years, in decades, in the difference between a long, vibrant, cardiovascularly healthy life and a sudden, devastating event that no one saw coming because no one was looking. Your heart protected you with estrogen's help for 30 or 40 years. It kept your arteries supple, your cholesterol managed, your blood pressure steady, your endothelium defended against inflammation and plaque. Now it is time for you to return the favor. Know your numbers, demand the tests, feed your arteries the nutrients they are hungry for, move your body with intention and consistency, and most importantly, refuse to accept the narrative that menopause is just something you endure, because endurance is not a strategy, and silence is not safety. If this changed the way you think about your health right now, if something in this shifted your understanding of what menopause actually means for your body, then I am asking you to share this with every woman you know who is over 45. Share it with your mother, your sister, your best friend, your colleague, because every woman who hears this message is a woman whose heart gets a fighting chance. Subscribe to this channel so you do not miss the conversations that come next, because we have so much more to uncover together, and every piece of knowledge is another layer of protection that your body deserves. This is your heart. This is your life, and you have far more power over both than anyone has ever told you.